Aloha Friday. Happy 2022.
Yeah.
2022. I almost went back a year, but hey, Aloha Friday, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about leadership and seizing time with the doctor, all the way from the UK, Shehab Jabir. He is a plastic surgeon, out of all things. But we're going to be talking about time because he also has a separate talent, which is we're going to dig into here. Shihab, thank you for being with me tonight. Thank you for joining me all the way from the UK, and I appreciate you being on. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, first of all, Enrique, thank you very much for inviting me. Really appreciate the invite and the support that you've given me. I think we started chatting around 4 or 5 months ago, and you've been a great guy. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you for inviting me and having me on. Sorry, just to go back to your question, what was it again?
No, just tell us a little bit about you and your background, because we're going to be
Sure.
talking about time, and it's unusual that we be talking about time if you're the plastic surgeon. So I want to bring that up.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, about me, well, I I grew up in Sri Lanka. I was born in Sri Lanka. Went to school there. Straight after school, I came over to the UK to obviously study medicine. And I've been here since I was 18 years old. Went through medical school. I've been working as a surgeon, well, as a doctor, as an intern, and then obviously as a surgeon now for the last 10 years. I've just completed my residency program last year, actually, and I'm doing what's called a fellowship, which is essentially a further year of specialty training. And obviously, um, I like hands, so I end up being a hand surgeon, but I'm also, obviously a plastic surgeon. So that's obviously my professional side. That said, I think, as per my LinkedIn post recently, I'd like to think that, things I get involved in, I like to get passionate about them. And, wristwatches and timekeeping and, even respecting the aspect of time has, and kind of understanding and how to utilize time effectively. These have been things that, I've been thinking about quite, from quite a young age. So I've liked watches. I think my first high value purchase where I, dished out all of my pocket money was on a watch. It was a Seiko timepiece, if I remember correctly. And then, since then, I've always, spent money on watches, not very expensive watches, but watches nonetheless, as my luxury purchase, as my kind of, the thing that, kind of gives me a bit of a rush in a way. It's my guilty pleasure. And, and then when it came to kind of deciding on something else, because I was at a point in my career where I wanted something to take my mind off, I thought, designing watches was something I'd like to do. And then obviously it snowballed into a brand, and now we've got Hawchester, London. It's taken me 5 years, but, I think it's been worth it.
Well, I tell you, for a guy that loves watches as well, I mean, I'm wearing a Submariner
Hmm.
Rolex. The reason why is it's just a beautiful timepiece, right? And number one. And number two, I said, after 26 years of naval service, I'm gonna buy me something, right? And it it was funny how I came about it, but I ended up with the timepiece that I wanted. You mentioned that 5 months ago we had exchanged, a conversation, and it was so intriguing because I saw that you were in the timepiece, but that I also saw that you was a doctor. And I
Hmm.
say, a lot of doctors, they like some nice timepieces. They get into that category of earning. Uh, but when you talk about time and the times that we've had for the last 2 years, if there's anything that people have learned to appreciate, it's time.
Hmm.
Time with family, time with loved ones, time with friends. These are things that you either were lacking and couldn't have, or people passed away and you no longer have, right? And so one of those things that we can't ever control, but we have to deal with, right?
Mhm.
So your history with time, with pieces, gems, and jewelry in general, has a rich. You have a rich history in that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You know, I think just to digress a bit, I think it was interesting because I was having a conversation actually with a colleague of mine. I were talking about watches and time and how actually the importance or the capability of measuring time, okay, actually resulted in a revolutionary kind of account of how we keep time. You know, I mean, if you want to measure something, if you can measure something, if you can define a way of measuring something, then you can always kind of find the output. So if you can measure time, when clocks and watches and ways of timekeeping were invented, the greatest impact that it caused was that it meant people could actually take account of that time and see how they were using it. So I think you touched on a very important point about utilizing time and how this day and age we have such a um, we even watching the clock, for example. This is kind of something that we use in our language, clock watching. You know this a few hundred years ago when there were no clocks or watches, we didn't actually think about that. Probably sundials and things. But before these timepieces were invented, how did we account for time? We probably didn't account as much. But then coming back to your question about my family history and heritage, yes, you're absolutely right. Um, my father, including all of his side of the family, were jewelers, merchants, um, and they obviously had associations with watch brands. They were not watch makers or designers, or they didn't build their own brands, but they definitely had some input when it came to brands. And in fact, even one of my close cousins is actually a representative of a number of high-end watch brands. So we've kind of had that in the family for a long time, and it goes back 5 generations. And what happened actually was that um, around about 5 years ago, my father passed away, and it was quite a shock to the system. I was living in the UK, he was in Sri Lanka, and he, had a medical procedure which went wrong, and he was, suddenly he passed away. So I just got a call. So I still remember the day. There was, it was a Friday or a Saturday. I had worked my own call shift, put 12, 13 hours into the shift. In fact, I actually finished at 1 a.m. in the morning when I had to finish at 8 p.m. just because there was a case that I wanted to be involved in, the life-threatening infection. I stayed over, and I was absolutely knackered the next day. And I wake up and see 6 missed calls, and I knew there was something wrong, especially when you see home and it's 6 missed calls at 6 a.m. because I know that they never call me at that time. So he passed away suddenly, and at that point, again, sometimes the most challenging circumstances in your life will be the ones that actually give you the most amount of change, and push you forward the most. And I'm a strong believer in that. And when that event happened, obviously I was in a state of shock. I didn't know what to kind of do, what to make out of life. That nice, comfortable blanket or cushion of having your parents to kind of help you suddenly ceased to exist. It just, overnight it disappeared. And it took me about a few months to kind of get my head around things. But um it's at that point that I started to think about my family, that I would like to preserve the legacy that was started, something that's been in our family for 5 generations. And that's how the idea came about for Hawchester. But it came from a place of grief. But as you can see, 5 years down the line now, I feel that I've done something. Something that was traumatic was used to propel me to do something positive.
Yeah, uh, and you also know I lost my mother in April of this last year, and I hear your story, and these are things that happen, that time literally, stands still. When
Hmm.
you get news like this, and I remember it was 2:33 in the morning. Now I'll never forget it. It's just one of those things. And the interesting part of all that is that we remember timestamps.
Absolutely.
When we're born, they stamp us. At this time you was born. When you die, they call it, right? They stamp you once again. This time, that's the time you expired. And so I remember 2:33 vividly.
Hmm.
And it's amazing how we correlate a lot of our life events around time. There is a wall in my house where we have each newborn picture of all of our children. Now we have six, so it's a pretty big wall. We
Mm.
have six. There's their picture. Underneath is their name and the their date of birth. So what if it's September 9th, and then right underneath is the a clock that is timed or positioned to the exact time they were born.
Hmm.
And right underneath all that, it says, at this moment, time stood still.
Yeah.
And, we celebrate, lives by time.
Hmm.
We acknowledge death by time.
Hmm.
There are events in our lives that are defined by time. We remember the season. We remember how it felt, whether it was day or it was night. And it's just our life revolves around time, yet some act like they have it forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
You
I think.
you
Sorry. Go on. Sorry.
no,
Go
no,
on.
you were mentioning the time that it took, and you're still working on, this medical background, and I'm like, wow, that's a long time. But go ahead.
No. No. I totally agree. I think all of us are guilty of not paying the adequate amount of respect to this aspect of time. Um, it doesn't mean I don't think it means, or what I mean is that you should constantly be worrying about time and how you're utilizing it. But I think it doesn't mean that if you're watching a movie that you should feel like you're wasting time. Although there were times in my life, where read all of this material about time and how to manage it, and procrastination and how that was bad for you, and the negative impact of procrastinating and so on. And that a wise person always assesses how he uses time and so on. you know and there was a period in my life where when I was in university, um, I felt that I was procrastinating too much, so I read all of these self-help books on procrastination and how to overcome them. And I went into this particular mode of trying to map out every single little detail of what I was doing every day, and I found that to be actually very time consuming. uh, I wouldn't advise that, but I would certainly advise making a schedule, assessing how you're utilizing time every day. And I find that if you can do something with your time early in the morning, that sets your day up to get the best out of the rest of your day. So I think you do need to have some downtime, but I think if you can take into account how you're using time every single day, then you'll probably end up being more productive, probably happier. I always find that if I do something productive with my time, it tends to make me happier. And it'll be something like reading a book, or replying to something, getting something out of it instead of, just letting it pass by. Seizing time, as per, the show's title, I would say.
Oh, I tell you, first of all, you're so right. We have to be aware but not be scared. I say, be aware but not be scared. um, time will come and go. It's what you do with it. We cannot be so wrapped up around that everything is just chaotic and anxiousness, right?
Mm,
But you have to be aware of the time that you have and what you are investing in it, because that's what you get back. So at this time, I want to thank Crystal and Jacob for being with us. And there are several others. If you are out there and joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube, by all means, just send us a message. We're talking about leadership and seizing time. 2022 has just begun. We are shy, what, 7 days into it, right? 7 days into 2022. And already, I guarantee you, you already either displayed that you're going to waste some time or you've displayed that, hey, some things have changed. In the last 7 days, I've done this or I've done that to make sure that my time is well invested. You have mentioned about, you sometimes you feel like, man, I wasted. I've felt sometimes that I've wasted a good chunk of time.
mm,
And then after it's done, you can't do anything to recover it, right? So then
mm.
the only thing you can do is say, and take some deliberate action and propose for yourself a different course where you don't do that, right? But there are
Yeah.
some times, Shihab, that I just don't feel like doing nothing.
No, absolutely. And we've all got that. And I think when you feel that way, I mean, I think you should just give in and take a break, you know. Um, there are several times in the day, in one day. I mean, today, for example, I was off work actually, but um, I got such a good response to my LinkedIn post that, I've had probably 5 conversations today with 5 different people. I don't know how useful all of the conversations were, right? But you have to take the opportunities, and you obviously try and utilize your time as wisely as possible. And as long as you've done something, that you feel is productive and you feel that's going to give you something, I feel trying to assess every outcome and say, oh, did I use that wisely? Did I not use that wisely? Is probably a bit overburdening yourself. But if you feel like you don't want to do anything, that's probably an indicator that you do need to take a break. And um, this is something that's very common. I mean, um, especially being in the profession that I am, we've got exams. I mean, I still, I'm an attending in terms of the American system. I'm classified as an attending because I've completed my residency program. But even now, I've still got exams that I got my eye on that I want to execute and do and complete. And what I find is that if I was to worry about, oh, have I done this much studying or have I done that much studying? When I was younger, I used to be quite obsessed about the number of hours of studying I had done. So in university, if I hadn't done 10 hours of studying a day, I'd be quite disappointed in myself. Um, and I found that to be something that actually makes me hate studying. It was a really bad system. It meant that the next, it meant that studying became a painful process. And it's only in the last few years that I recognized that this is actually not good for me, and actually changed my systems such that I don't study as much. Okay, I study less, but it's better quality. I try to change my environment. I take breaks in between, and that's meant that my results are much better. So it might be that if you're investing too much time in something, okay, you're probably um, your face is probably very close to the picture and you're not seeing the whole picture. You might need to step back a bit, and maybe that will give you a better understanding, a better view of what's going on in the entire picture, if that makes any sense.
Yes, definitely. You there's going to be some times you got to step back.
Hmm.
Uh, Being too close to it, you can't clearly see hardly any, especially if you're like sighted, far sighted, and you have all these different uh limiting, ocular limiting things. because sometimes it does call to step back and relax, and you're
Yeah.
so right. When you feel like, man, I don't want to really do anything today, go ahead with that. Go
Yeah.
ahead with that and take some time, because that recoup, that healthy, just setting down and just being quiet and still, is a benefit that seldom is taken advantage of. We're in a
Absolutely.
world that requires an answer to time. Almost everywhere we are, there is a requirement to answer the use of time.
Mm.
And sometimes you just got to say, I'm not answering anything. Matter of fact, I'm not
Hmm.
doing anything for a good while, and I'll see you when I see you. And
Absolutely.
I've seen that often in social media. Some people say, "Hey, I'm closing up. I'll see you in several months," and that's just it. I'll be back. If you're here, great. If you're not, I'll start all over. And I love those approaches, because you do need to give yourself some room to focus on some things, to focus on the things that matter, actually,
Hmm.
because in all the happenings of the day, it doesn't mean that just because things are happening that actually something's happening. It could
Hmm.
just be busy work. And then
Hmm.
busy work doesn't amount to anything, and you can't get it back. So let's talk a little bit about this timepiece. Now, folks, I wish I had a picture, and I wanted a video to show you here. Um, this timepiece, it both the chrono and the regular one. I don't even know how to separate both, but I'm sure you know the names for both.
Yeah.
Um, I
The Korean
I
love language.
yeah,
Yeah.
I happen to love the 24-hour clock, so I got the one that had the 24-hour clock on it. But
Hmm.
talk to me about the process. I know that it was something that was birthed in you as young, but
Hmm.
this whole process of making a watch is not an easy thing.
True.
So take us through that process from the time you say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, to now that, folks, hey, it is for sale. I bought one. I'm going to tell you about that later, but check out the link. But tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So I mean, yeah. So everything begins as a crazy idea, right? Everything, when I started, um, it was just something exciting, something that I didn't take extremely seriously. I didn't go about it in the conventional sense of assessing what the market wants, developing a product to suit the market's tastes. I took the rather unconventional route of building something that I wanted, something that I felt I'd like to build. And then if I took it to market and there were people who were like-minded and felt that it was great, then it's all good. But if it wasn't for someone, then I'm not going to obviously push it down their throat in a way. But essentially, the way the whole thing started was, well, I had this, obviously, like I said, event that shocked me into thinking about diversifying my skill set. Um, I've always been somebody who loves always getting involved in a variety of things. I've never been somebody to stay in one lane. So I felt, that an entrepreneurial journey for me would be quite fulfilling. I loved my profession, and I still love my profession. I love the work that I do, but I also want to be challenged in a different way. And to be honest, even when I was in university, I did involve myself in a number of entrepreneurial type activities. And in fact, I was invited to pitch. I was one of the finalists at one of the pitching competitions, which is run in the UK. Obviously, my idea didn't get funded, but it's always been in my blood, just because of my family line and what they've been doing. So at yeah, around about 5 years ago, I felt I wanted to design my timepiece. So I started learning how to draw, sketch, and so on. From that point, we then I mean I then went on to think about manufacturing this timepiece. So what I did was started contacting manufacturers and going to watch exhibitions in the UK because that was what was accessible to me at the time. And following on from that, um, I decided very early on. I had a business partner when I started. It was a close friend of mine, another doctor, in fact. Unfortunately, we had to break the partnership, and I had to continue on my own. Um, you know, but when I started out the process, I always wanted to build something that I could be proud of. I didn't want to just do it for the sake of doing. I didn't want to do it for the sake of making a quick buck or something like that. It wasn't a business idea per se. It was a passion. It was something I wanted to do, and I wanted to do something well and something that I'd be proud of. So when I had these discussions with my business partner, who was my friend, I basically convinced him that we should not only travel within the UK, but we should travel abroad. So that ended up in us going to various places, Hong Kong, China, and eventually I've been to Switzerland as well. Had numerous discussions with manufacturers. We visited the factories. We visited the component suppliers, and I mean, we had a great time. I mean, well, I had a great time because I enjoyed this kind of thing. I hate holidays where you just sit. Well, I don't hate them, but I generally get bored of holidays where you sit on the beach for days on end. I think the maximum I could take was probably 2 or 3 days, and then I'll get itchy feet and I'll have to do something. So I love this kind of holiday where I was essentially doing something useful, with my time, by learning about manufacturing and what the manufacturers required from us, designing the watches, discussing the details, and so on. So from that point, obviously, there were loads of discussions with manufacturers, and obviously I presented my designs. There were people who said they could do it. There were people who said they can't. And then obviously, eventually we prototyped the watches. And that took around about 2, 3 years because I was obviously working and trying to do this at the same time. Um, Following on from that, once the watches were finished, the packaging was something I was very focused on. And, we went to a number of iterations of packaging. I started off with wanting watch boxes, but then I decided that, to be honest, I wanted to add value to the product. So instead of having just a watch box, I decided that the watch should come in a continental wallet. So the wallet obviously doubles up as, a vessel for the watch, but it also has space for your passports, your cards, cash, coins, whatever you want. There's a continental wallet. You can take it with you when you're traveling, and it adds value so that it's not like a watch box that you just chuck aside once the watch is in your possession. So again, that took a number of months to kind of devise. I designed that and so on. And while all this was going on, I was also working on the branding, on the logo. So the logo that you see is my logo. It's my design. The name is my name. So every single creative aspect of this project that you see, from the website to the logo to the names to the colors, even the colors of the watches were chosen by me from a Pantone color guide. I sat one day with like this book that's got 1,000 colors in them, and I had to choose which shade of green that I was going for. And these are very difficult decisions when you have 100 different shades of green staring at you to decide which shade of green am I going to go for. Yeah, and even for example, the watch hands have been designed specifically by myself for this watch. So I had the manufacturer that makes the watch for me actually came back to me and said, we can't find the hands that you want, because normally what they do is they would pick out the hands from a manual of watch hands. So, they came back to me and said, we can't find your hands in any of the manuals, and we're going to have to make them from scratch. I said, well, that's what I set out to do. I wanted to make my own stamp on this project. So let's go ahead and make the watch hands from scratch. So every single component, from the case to the hands to the dial to the pips on the edges to the leather straps, everything has been designed. Even the packaging, as I mentioned, it's all been designed specifically for this brand. There are no kind of shortcuts. There are no bits that are obviously it's manufactured in a mass-produced manner, but it's not it's not been somewhere we've taken components from somewhere else and just fit them in just to make a watch for the sake of it. The only thing would be the movements, obviously, are provided by Miyota, the parent company being Citizen, but this is a standard practice in watchmaking. Yeah,
Well,
sorry, that's a
yeah,
long
no,
story.
and no, it's perfectly fine because you get to really understand the type of effort that has been placed in the creation of this timepiece. Now, folks, if you gander over to the comment section, I placed the link on there to the video that actually goes to the watch. You're gonna love it. If you're a timepiece type of person like I am, there's not many watches that I'm willing to buy past my Rolex. They're not. I think I've gotten to the pinnacle of what I thought was but as an appreciator of timepieces, I looked at it and I looked at every aspect of what you had. Now, folks, like if you didn't hear from me earlier, I am an owner of this watch. It is beautiful. The display is beautiful. The way it presents itself is beautiful. And on top of wanting to support this project, I I felt that the investment in another timepiece, which it becomes secondary, right? It becomes a secondary timepiece for me. But I thought it was just so beautiful. And I'm gonna put. And I'm sure this is Jacob. He says, "This is awesome. Your vision coming to reality is indeed an achievement. Not many of us have achieved huge blessings. Thank you for that. Take a look
Thank
at
you.
that
Thank you.
video. I'm telling you, you'll love it. And at the end of this conversation, we're gonna have a little surprise here, but we'll keep that to the end. Um, what I like about the timepiece, and as we're talking about seizing time, is that you poured yourself, you poured your imagination, you poured your essence into this watch. I tell
Mhm,
my son all the time, I say, son, don't be a cheap copy. Be the original you were intended to be. Don't
mhm,
try to be somebody else. Don't try to live through somebody else. Live your life and don't be a cheap copy. This indeed is not a cheap copy of someone else's work. This is a realization, as it was just, talking achievement of your vision, of your intent. It's
mhm,
it's very evident that this watch, this timepiece, holds your intent in it. And I love the way the band was constructed. And there's a lot of other things. The wallet, the international, this thing that you can go around the world with, was a I was looking. I said, I've never seen anything like it. Never
mhm,
seen anything like it. And you also have part of this a device that I've never had to use because I just take my watch to
yeah.
Rolex, and if there's anything, they take care of it. But you add this element of that the owner can have a relationship with this watch. Now
Mhm.
I don't know how much of it I'm gonna be using, but
Oh, it's easy. It's easy.
so you're not only giving a timepiece or presenting a timepiece for folks to enjoy. You
Mhm.
have indeed added value to it,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate your effort in that. As a timepiece lover,
Mhm.
you have actually devoted and infused your whole being into it, and I just wish the very best
Oh, thank you.
for you in terms of the market and how you uh, uh, are going to explode and get into people's homes. What I love about it is that not only is it a well constructed and well thought out timepiece, it's an affordable timepiece, which is a different thing. When you talk about, a Rolex, you're looking at a minimum about $6,000
Mhm.
to upwards to Lord knows how, because
Yeah.
I've seen a basic Submariner. And by basic, I mean gold with the blue face.
Mhm.
That's 30,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not cheap by no by no means. Some people can't don't can't even afford that. But you're making it accessible. Now let's talk a little bit about leadership in time, because
Mhm.
we mentioned how time has affected us, how time has slipped us by, how sometimes we waste time, how sometimes we need to invest in downtime.
Mhm.
Um, and leaders are requiring still today the same effort for time in an environment that may call for other things. And I'm seeing a lot of frustration in the workforce because time is not the same. Now, the number time is the same, right? We've measured time and that's how we go.
Mhm.
But our times have changed.
Mhm.
Um, you work in a very high intense environment.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, you were supposed to be out at 8 and you left at 1 in the morning.
Mhm.
That easy time slips you by.
Yeah.
How
Yes, sir.
have you seen this time that we've spent the last 2 years change in your profession?
Ah, well, I mean, there's always, I think, you know, I mean, in my profession, you can't, sometimes you can't measure time and how much you're spending, how much time you're spending doing what you're doing. Um, it's interesting because when you're doing something, I'm sure you've heard of the concept of being in a flow state. And when you're in a flow state, you know, you actually don't feel the time pass by. And it's because your brain's so focused on what you're doing, right? And I find that when I'm doing a particular operation, especially when you're doing every single bit of it yourself, and you're very intensely focused on trying to get the best outcome on every step of the procedure, you get into this flow state where you're looking down, you're doing some of the procedure, and then you look up and you look at the time and you kind of go, "Oh my goodness, I've spent 1 hour doing this and I didn't even feel that go by." Um, so there are over the last 2 years, obviously there have been several moments where I've probably been in a flow state and not really recognized time going by, and that could be you know in theaters, it could be just talking to someone about an experience I had at work. It could be trying to design something. You know, you just you sometimes lose track of it. But I think as long as you don't as long as you're utilizing it, okay, in that flow state, I think you're always you'll always end up with something positive. Um, but yeah, I mean, in my profession over the last 2 years, yeah, I try and look for that flow state now as best as I can, and I'm fortunate in that doing hands. I love doing hand surgery. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm regularly in that flow state when I'm in theater, operating on a hand, thinking about, oh, you know, once I fix this fracture or once I put this finger back on, this patient will have function of their hand back and the livelihoods back. And it's a very privileged position to be in. Yeah,
So, folks, 2022, it's the same for everybody. Everybody got a January 1st. The 7 days have elapsed. And I hope that now that, we're only 7 days in,
hmm
that you could at least, for those of you listening, that you could at least assess. It's a nice block of time a week, right? That you can assess how you're handling time, how you're approaching this thing called time, and how much of it you are allowing to slip away, or how much of it you're actually seizing and saying, you know what, in the last 7 days, or I've done some things. I know myself, I'm very conscious of time to the point where I'm deliberate. I'm going to spend this much time doing this. And once that's done, it's done, you know, because it could actually slip away and I'll be doing some other thing. I have two young boys. They love them some video games. And guess what? So does dad. And we could sit down for hours playing Minecraft or whatever, especially Minecraft. Folks, I don't know if you know about Minecraft, but that'll take you a whole day to to survive and build a village, right? So, um, you know, 22 fresh. What advice would you give someone that's struggling with seizing time?
hmm Okay, that's a pretty good question actually. And while you were just saying that, I was just thinking that you know a common, well, common, or I don't know if it's common, but something that I've heard and I think is a very apt thing for this conversation we're having is that you can underestimate what you're doing in 10 years, but you can overestimate what you do in the next day or two, right? And we're all, I mean, I find myself constantly guilty of that. I'll overestimate what I can do in a day or two or a week, but I definitely underestimate what I do in the next 5 years or 10 years. So, pacing yourself, I'd say, is key. Another thing I would say is, yes, you want to look forward, again, plan forward, but sometimes you can't connect the dots looking forward. You're going to have to connect the dots looking back. So I think, if you've always felt that you're not utilizing time well, then just look back and see how you utilize it. And I'm sure you could find something positive there because you can connect the dots when you look back. Hindsight is 2020, as they say, right? So I would say look back, you know, find the positives there, and then use that to inspire yourself to aim to do better, when you're moving forward or in the future. I don't think there is any point in becoming despondent or, thinking that I'm never going to be able to use my time wisely. Yeah, each of us have different capabilities and different tolerances. So, just because somebody else can spend 10 hours doing something doesn't mean that you have to spend the same 10 hours. And this is something I learned quite late, in fact, in my profession, that you just need to work smart and not hard. So if you can achieve, if you can achieve twice as much in half the time, then you're already winning. So, my advice would be, that you don't become too worried about it. You don't become obsessive about, how you're spending your time, but probably, um, look at the positives, use that to inspire yourself, push forward. And, it's incremental. It's incremental. You're not going to get better at managing time tomorrow or in a week or 2 weeks. It takes some effort, and over time, you will start managing it much better. And I mean, that's what I would say, that, you have to work at, the level that you can work at, and each of us are different in that regard. All of us have different tolerances. You need to figure out that sweet spot, where you're in between using time wisely and also not becoming too obsessive about it, but also not becoming too relaxed about it. And then you need to determine that. And, you just need to keep working at it, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a saying, "Know thyself." Right? If you know thyself is a hard thing. That's not easy.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people that will die and never know themselves, or never lived the life that they were meant to live,
Hmm.
um, or designed to live. If you're listening to this Aloha Friday Live, and you're wondering about time and how can you could use it, you first need to know yourself, know what you're able and willing to commit to. Willingness is one of the things that I deal with a lot when I'm doing leadership development. The very first questions are around the willingness of the subject, the willingness of the client. Because if the client is not willing, then we can't get too far. But so figure out what you're willing to do to ensure that the time that you are active and doing things, that they're productive, that they are um, definitely adding value to you, that they are allowing for you to not only invest in the current time that you are having, but in your future, right? So your steps should be leading you to bigger steps in the
Hmm.
future, or your actions should be leading you to bigger actions in the future. And I love how you stated that the underestimating and overestimating.
Hmm.
We do not, because we don't see the future, and so we truly do underestimate how far we can go, um, in 5-10 years. I've looked at companies that have started, and 5 years ago, 20 years ago, you
Hmm.
think about 20 years, we're still calling, you know, young men and women that are 20 babies. Especially if you're 50 and above, you start saying, "Oh, that's a baby." But when you talk about time, 20 years can seem like a long time, but it really isn't, based on how you live. And look at Bezos, 20 years.
Hmm.
In 20 years, he's become,
Yeah.
you know, what a firestorm. So
Absolutely.
don't underestimate your time, especially when talking about a decade or two. Um, you know, Shehab, we have talked about time. We've talked about exquisite timepieces. We've talked about what's good and bad about wasting time and things of
Hmm.
that nature. This year is still fresh. You've given some great advice on,
Hmm.
not sweating it too much. You have it. What we don't want to see folks do is squander it.
Hmm.
A squanderer of time is a person that doesn't appreciate it. And sometimes things that we don't appreciate go by faster.
Hmm.
They kind of skip us. And so, what I wish for all listeners, first of all, Shahab, thank you for your time. Thank you for the effort that you've placed into this timepiece. I know I'm going to enjoy it for quite some time, and I will tell you about it, down the road.
Yes.
But folks, um, thank you for sharing this time with us. I know it's still early in the year. This is our very first Aloha Friday Live. We're talking about time for a reason, because it will escape you if you don't use it wisely. But don't abuse it, don't squander it, use it wisely. And Shehab, any parting words in terms of your watch? I want to talk about your watch specifically here because I'm going to
Sure.
tell the audience what we have in store for them.
Well, look, I think firstly I'd like to say thank you for inviting me again. It's been a pleasure talking about time. I think it's certainly really focused my mind on trying to utilize this year to the maximum, to make and utilize time as wisely as I can this year. And I can, I can feel that this year is going to be, another year that I hopefully make some progress. And all of us, in this conversation today, will end up using it as wisely as we can, especially given the fact that this is a great reminder, for the start of the year. In fact, and time as a resource, I think is the most valuable thing that we've got. I always tell myself that time and health are these are the things that actually create your wealth. Money is great, but money gives you choice, but it can't buy you time, or it can't buy you health. So
That's right.
you know time and health are is usually your bank. You need to think of it as your bank balance. That's your bank balance, right? So I mean, in terms of the watch, well, have a look at my website. Okay. um I am reachable anytime, anywhere. You've got my email address there. I'd love to hear anybody's comments, feedback, thoughts. I'd like to say that despite having spent as much effort as I have, I'm very open-minded to feedback. I'm very open to listening. I'd love to hear any thoughts about it. If you'd like to support me by getting one, go ahead. Any questions, ask me. I built this brand to try and do something different, to try and add value to the watch industry, and to kind of serve and build something that was worth building. So I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to comments, criticisms. Whatever you want, I'm there, and willing to take everything on board. Yeah, and I consider myself somebody who's still learning. I don't know everything. And yeah, do let me know.
Well, I'm looking forward to the watch, in 20 years being the Rolex equivalent. That's what I'm
Oh,
looking forward to. and and folks, so what is the website so they can go and check it out for themselves?
so it's www.hawchester.com, and that's Hawchester spelled as HAWCHESTER.com. Yeah, there's a magazine section if you're interested in watches. There's a little bit about the history of watchmaking in the UK. As the United Kingdom was for hundreds of years the center of watchmaking until um, various reasons such as taxes and the world wars resulted in the watchmaking moving to Switzerland. But the UK was the premier destination for it for hundreds of years, and a lot of the automatic watchmaking advancements were made by British watchmakers. So yeah, so have a look at it. And there's also, I mean, an article about myself and the brand and where I aim to take it. Please do have a look. And yeah, you know,
All right, we'll make sure that Shahab writes that. Go in there and type it in there so that people can go and look. So this is the surprise, folks. Right? We want you to be right for the year, not only in your purpose and your determination. We want you to look good as well. So Shahab has been so gracious to provide one. Right? This is one 50% discount to me to give. Right? This is special, folks. This is not your your middle of the rung type of watch. So I'm going to determine who that goes to, right? Um, and if you're interested, after you look at the website, you're interested in buying this timepiece, you're going to DM me, and we're going to talk about that 50%. But all in all, for anybody that is wanting to purchase this watch, he's also afforded me a 30% discount code that's available to anybody. But the 50 we're gonna have to talk about, right? So that it goes to a person that's really interested. I'm gonna make the 30% discount available in the chat. You'll see that as part of this video. And if you're catching this on replay, you'll see it in the comments. But the 50, if you're really interested in buying this timepiece, you're going to DM me, and then we're going to chat about that. So tonight, our very first Aloha Friday Live of 2022, we're talking leadership and seizing time with Shehab Jabir, all the way from the UK. My brother, thank you so much for being with
Thank
me
you.
tonight. Thank you for the work that you do on the medical side. It is greatly appreciated. You truly do give people back their life. And so I appreciate that so much. On the timepiece, you've done a great job, brother. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to wear mine. I will show it on Aloha Friday Live. I'm gonna undon my Rolex, and I'm gonna wear yours, and we're gonna show that off a little. Folks, thank you for
Thank you
being
very
with
much.
me.
Thank you very much.
Any
The honor is
last
all.
words? Yeah, any last words?
No, I'm so glad that you invited me. Thanks for all the kind words and gestures. You've been a great supporter. Really appreciate it. And I feel extremely honored that you'd remove your Rolex to make space for my Hawchester on your wrist. I think that's definitely something that it's great to hear. It's great to hear. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. I say in life, if we're not a blessing, then why are we around? But
Mhm.
it'll be my honor. We'll do that. Folks, thank you. Mahalo. Nui loa for thank you for being with us. And we will see you next Friday as we get another guest here on Aloha Friday Live. Until then, aloha.